Traffic just keeps getting worse and worse. And Americans are spending more and more time in their cars.
Hi, Hugh here, M26 closed eastbound.
Overseas, some cities are taking drastic action, charging big fees to drive downtown.
Within days, congestion itself dropped by roughly 30%.
Or doing away with traffic lights and signs altogether.
You find hardly any accident with injured people anymore.
Tonight, Gridlock Nation. A few solutions to the traffic mess.
From ABC News. This is Nightline. Reporting from Washington, Ted Koppel.
Among the many wonderful things about working for Nightline, there is the commute, which is to say when most of my fellow Marylanders and our friends from Virginia and Washington are driving to and from work, I'm not. And when I am, they're not. It's one of the advantages of working on a late-night news program. Most motorists in this region, however, spend an average of 67 hours a year stuck in traffic. That's not nearly as bad as Los Angeles, where the average commuter spent 93 hours a year stuck in traffic. But somewhat surprisingly, it's worse than New York. Annual delay per commuter trying to get in and out of the city from Connecticut, New Jersey, and other parts of New York State, only 50 hours a year. Only. When it's you and you're stuck and you're late to work or trying to make it home for dinner, those hours battling rush hour traffic can be among the most frustrating of your life. But if you think it's difficult to get Americans to give up their guns, try getting us to give up our cars. Across the ABC News landscape this week, my colleagues and I are focusing on various aspects of traffic and our general reluctance to give up the flexibility of our own cars in favor of mass transportation where it exists or carpools where it doesn't. Sometimes it seems we need painful incentives to convince us not to drive downtown. The congestion tax, for example. If you want to drive into certain parts of London, what's been designated the red zone between the hours of 7 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. on a weekday, it'll cost you about $10 a day. And as Nightline correspondent Dave Marish now reports, it seems to be working.
News at 5.
Hi, Hugh here, M26 closed eastbound.
Of all the world's great cities, few are as car-resistant as London.
Robin Hood roundabout on the A3, the traffic lights are out, which means traffic is...
Flying up the Thames, an American might say, look at the historic bridges. But Londoners would exclaim, look at all that open space on the river. They rarely find it on their streets. Auto traffic in London has been notorious since motor cars first ran horses off the roads.
London didn't have any kind of planning or reorganization. Many of its streets, unlike this one, are not very straight and are in some cases literally medieval.
Even close to 70 years ago, traffic problems in London's Trafalgar Square created cartoonish solutions.
Now see the traffic jump to it and come out unscathed.
Until recently, it seemed, you could endlessly speed up the pictures, but never accelerate the traffic around the square. For a lifelong Londoner and career cabbie like John Hurley, the streets of his city had become a 21st century nightmare.
I was regularly getting gridlocked in London. People were getting out the cab and walking because it was quicker to walk than actually getting the cab.
Then, 2 years ago this week, London instituted what they call congestion charging. £5, that's almost $10 every day you bring a car into the core of central London. More than 700 cameras were installed on city streets, and a fleet of roving camera vans intercepted drivers trying to sneak into the center city. The message: it will cost you to drive downtown.
It's been 2 years now that the congestion charge has been on the books. And if you're asking, has it had an effect? The answer is yes, definitely.
Within days, of the inauguration of the charge, congestion itself dropped by roughly 30% almost right away.
Says Bob Kiley, the American hired by London's mayor to be the boss of London's traffic and transit systems. And Tony Travers, who watchdogs the city from the London School of Economics, agrees.
The amount of traffic has reduced and congestion has gone down, and that makes it easier for cars, taxis, buses to get about.
And so does taximan Hurley.
The thing now is that you can actually determine how long a journey is going to take, whereas before it was toss a coin time.
What helps the commuter system work is London's mass transit system. There's a wide network of commuter rail lines and the London Underground, neither of which has been much affected since congestion charging began.
Then there are the ubiquitous red buses everywhere in London, like this classic double-decker Routemaster. These guys crisscross virtually every neighborhood and shopping street in Greater London.
Part of the anti-congestion scheme was bulking up that bus fleet, and results do show more buses are more full than before the charge. What's not to like? Downtown London is a shopping area. Oxford Street is home to some of the world's most famous stores, and on the streets around it, there are hundreds of small shops and services. Nick Goulding represents those proprietors for the Forum of Private Business.
Well, many retailers find that their passing trade has gone and that people now don't make the trips that they did.
Well, 600 of king prawns.
The congestion charge doesn't just reduce car traffic, it has reduced people traffic. There are fewer shoppers coming into the charging zone.
We are struggling, there's no question about it. We've had people leave our establishment. We can't afford to replace them. We're all working all hours. We're not taking any holidays. We've lost 20% of our turnover, and that's not feasible in any business.
Not everyone believes retail trade is dying in central London. New mini supermarkets are popping up all over the congestion charge area. Why? Because the congestion charge favors the big brand name chains over the individual stores.
There are fleet discounts available to very large operators that aren't there for small businesses.
But Bob Kiley doubts the seriousness of the retail problem. Not one appeal against congestion charging by a retailer has been upheld. Perhaps the courts call it legal, but there is no question the congestion charge is most popular with the people who can most easily afford it.
Particularly for the better off, who value their time enormously, being able to get around more predictably and more quickly is a significant benefit, not only in terms of their psychology and stress levels, but frankly, in terms of their earning capacity.
For decades, London seemed a city that changed at the speed of its traffic. But recently, traffic has speeded up, and brand name commerce has bulked up. To David Blagden, it's the congestion charge chasing away traditional customers that's changing London to something he doesn't want.
The point of a vibrant capital city, I mean, Paris has got it right because they say, well, there has to be 6 or 7 butchers, bakers, fishmongers, artisans, such as myself. There has to be them there, otherwise the city will die and it'll just become a soulless, empty environment.
Changing people's driving habits changes a lot, on the ground and in the air and inside people's heads.
So why not rip out all the stop signs and traffic signals? Sound crazy? Well, one town in Europe did just that.
You see people moving, we negotiate a little bit, and when you see as soon as I stop, they go on. So we help each other, and I feel a better human being than I was before.
See what happened when we come back.
This is ABC News Nightline, brought to you by Cisco Systems.
Just one more sign among a welter of signs, beacons, notices, warnings, threats, advice, cautions, remarks and observations. And when a driver's not reading, he may have time to look where he's going.
Over the years, London's persistent traffic problems have begotten many solutions, most of them involving regulating driver behavior by adding road signs and rules. The congestion charge is just the latest attempt to teach people about driving. Even a big budget deficit caused by the collection of fewer charges than expected is called proof that the lesson is being learned.
Because it means that people have made the right choice. They've decided not to come in by car.
Just take your credit card number, please.
Perhaps that's why, although there are many ways to pay the charge, by phone or text message, via the internet or a local retailer, there is no automatic payment system like the American Easy Pass. A lot of forgetful people miss that daily midnight deadline and wind up paying almost $200 for their drive into the zone. Says Bob Kiley, too bad for them.
So maybe you'll forget once, but because of the penalty process, you probably won't do it a second time. Deterrence is obviously critical to the working of the zone itself.
Deterrence is the main reason why Kiley plans to expand the charging zone and boost the fee by 60% to £8, almost $16 a day, after only 2 years, making at least one person happy.
I anticipate that there will be increases in bike sales as people do everything possible to avoid paying this congestion charge.
Ed Hewitt manufactures and sells the Congestion Buster, a mini bike literally built to beat the system.
What they do is they drive their car to the edge of the congestion zone, park the car, get the bike out, and then they just ride into the congestion zone on the bike.
Older two-wheelers have also started to reappear in the city, and this has also had an impact.
Official data do show that there has been a reduction in pollution since the congestion charge was introduced.
And official statistics show
the level of fatalities and major accidents is on the way down in London.
And the city's more secure because the vans, which watch out for non-payers of the congestion charge, also track other people for the police and, if need be, the security services.
Every morning we're given a floppy disk, which we load into the system, and on there, today, there are 510 numbers of special interest.
In the northern Dutch town of Drochten, seemingly a world away from terrorism and congestion, a traffic engineer named Hans Monderman has been driving reform in a different direction. Monderman's first moves eliminate a traffic light and most of the signs around downtown Drochten's two main intersections.
So confusion is the first start.
And the confusion has to do with eradicating the borders between the road and the village itself.
Exactly, because they divided the world into the world of traffic and the world of human beings, and suddenly you're part of the human world.
Monderman's lesson for drivers? Pay attention not just to the road, the signs, and the signals, but to the people around the road, driving their cars on it and trying to cross.
You see people moving, we negotiate a little bit, and when you see as soon as I stop, they go on. So we help each other, and I feel a better human being than I was before.
Looked at another way, I told Monderman, your libertarian philosophy of the roads is,
driver, be afraid, be very afraid, then you will be very careful, then you will be very safe.
Absolutely, and that has to do with risk, because risk is part of life and makes you careful where it's needed.
And the bottom line?
On these schemes you find hardly any accident with injured people anymore.
Traffic management, using personal responsibility rather than traffic lights and signs, seems to be working in this homogeneous small town of 50,000. But would it work as well in a large, diverse city like Amsterdam or London? Both Hans Monderman here in Drochten and Bob Kiley in London say it could.
In London, Exhibition Road in museum-rich South Kensington is set to become the city's laboratory for minimizing street signs and signals. And Kiley says what he's been doing in London with congestion charging definitely could be applied in America.
I think without question that congestion charging itself can be transferred to the United States. I certainly think that's true of New York, where I have worked, and Chicago and San Francisco, which have a kind of radial system where the center of the city becomes very, very congested and where traffic is overpowering almost, are very logical candidates for this kind of management of traffic through price.
The question is, would Americans stand for it as Londoners do? One clue, America goes nuts when gas prices pass $2 a gallon. In London today, regular goes for more than $6 a gallon. And people complain and fill up and drive on. I'm Dave Marish for Nightline in London.
When we come back, can the traffic problem be solved in this country? I'll turn to the man who coined the term gridlock. And joining me now, Gridlock Sam, as he's known on his website. Sam Schwartz writes a column for the New York Daily News on traffic. He is also a former New York City traffic commissioner, and more to the point, he's driven a cab for 5 years back in his misspent youth. Sam, there are times when it seems that the only solution is to pour just a 3-foot layer of asphalt over all the cars in Manhattan and start over again, but that clearly isn't a workable solution. Which of the solutions you've heard about, seen, do you think will work in New York?
Well, the one that London is trying, and London has succeeded, congestion charging, is exactly what I would like to see for New York City. In fact, a far more sophisticated system. London just charges you a flat rate, and it charges you based on coming in at 7 a.m. in the morning till 6 o'clock at night. I would charge for space that was a premium. The point is to treat space as a commodity. This is the American way. This is pure capitalism. And oddly enough, this is where the far right and the far left meet. I find the Manhattan Institute, a conservative think tank, talking about congestion pricing, and many of the left-wing transportation groups are also talking about it.
You know, the only people I hear complaining about that kind of approach are the small business owners, the ones who say, hey, wait a second, you are going to drive a lot of our commerce away.
Well, I don't think that's been the case in London, but I'd like you to think about what's happened in New York City. Post-World War II, in 1948, we were moving 3.7 million people into our central business district. Some 60 years later, we're now moving the exact same number of people into our central business district, but far less efficiently. If we could be more efficient, have fewer people in cars, more people in transit, we could probably bring that number up to well over 4 million.
Are you telling me that back in the 40s, Sam, more people were taking public transportation and not as many people were bringing their cars in? I mean, is that the difference?
And yes, in the 1940s, 2/3 of the people over the course of the day took the subway. Now fewer than half take the subway. And therein lies your problem, because those people, same number of people coming in, are now in cars. Imagine if we could have a different mix. We could finally break that 3.7 million number, go to 4 million, go to 4.5 million people, which we're going to have to as we develop the Far West Side and other areas. And that means that small business person will have even more business.
Most of our viewers are not in New York City. So what you and I are talking about in Manhattan, for example, how applicable is that to Detroit, Miami, Los Angeles?
I think it's very applicable. I think when you begin to think of how refined the intelligence systems that we have, where you can pinpoint a vehicle's location from a satellite system, imagine if you can reroute the traffic so that if you had a congested area, you can route the traffic through a pricing mechanism where people can make a choice away from traffic congestion and into freer moving traffic. By 2010, the technology will be so good, we'll know where everybody is at all times and be able to communicate with them.
So in a sense, what you're talking about is like one of those easy pass systems where you can go through a toll system without stopping, without passing any money over. Camera, takes a picture of your license plate or scans the whatever, the sticker in your windshield. You're talking about that as applicable to anyone who is driving in the city of New York or any other city for that matter.
Yeah, in any city, and the technology is so good that you could choose the technology. If you're paranoid, You could do it with a smart card, which is a debit card, and they won't know that it's you, but at least you're being charged from it. The technology is going to get so good, Ted, that your clock radio in the morning is going to say, Ted, wake up 10 minutes early. It's going to wake you up 10 minutes earlier to tell you there's a traffic jam, and then give you a choice of routes and price the routes a little differently.
Sam, I'm going to throw that clock radio out before it gets any ideas whatsoever, but you're good to come in, and thanks very much for your help and expertise.
Thank you.
The traffic series will continue all week on ABC News programs, and I'll be back with a note about tomorrow night's broadcast in a moment.
To receive a daily email about each evening's Nightline and a preview of special broadcasts, log on to the Nightline page at abcnews.com.
Tomorrow on Nightline, a provocative program that looks at the possibility of a terrorist attack in which the weapon is smallpox, a fictional scenario with a very real and important message.
It was a phone call from CDC that is investigating 33 suspected cases of smallpox in Los Angeles, the New York City area, Denver, and Salt Lake City. I think that it's clear that there will be public pressure now for the United States to take care of itself.
Smallpox, a two-night special series beginning tomorrow on Nightline. And that's our report for tonight. I'm Ted Koppel in Washington. For all of us here at ABC News, good night.
This has been a presentation of ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source.